Several years back, I started talking about how the left were going to bring us towards a second civil conflict in this country. And back then, people thought I was nuts because nobody was talking about this stuff. It was me and maybe John Mark, and that was it. You remember John Mark, great YouTuber, not around anymore. Surprise, surprise. But, it got me some attention from the press, a lot of negative attention, but some good stuff. I did some interviews. I went on a program called the Caravan to Midnight program with John B. Wells, and on that program I made a prediction. And I made this prediction based on my being a leftist in college, having lived with communists, and having lived in communist countries. And I said that the left would start a second civil war, they would have a communist revolution, and they would use a catalyst event to spark that revolution. And that catalyst event is right now. But I was wrong about something. You see, I predicted that they would have a Ukrainian-style revolution where they brought a bunch of intersectional protesting groups, right? Groups like Black Lives Matter, the Women's March, Antifa, because that's what happened in Ukraine. They brought all these different groups in, these different protest groups after an election. And then they brought in agitators, the tiki torch marchers. Surprise, surprise, they had tiki torches too, paid for by George Soros to go in and instigate things. They increased the violence day after day until finally they were fighting with police and they stormed the Capitol buildings and they took over the Ukraine. And that's what I predicted the left would do here. And I based that because I had been around lefties, spent time in these groups where they talked about this stuff, but I'd also seen the flyers. Refuse Fascism was putting out these flyers that said they were going to do just that. They had these other groups talking about 60 days of rage in D.C. And I thought this election would be that catalyst event. And it is. But the left, they don't have to do their revolution. They were going to. That's why they put up those huge barricades in front of the White House. Because they thought Trump would win. And under any normal circumstance, Trump would have won outright. He won every in-person vote. I mean, not every in-person vote, but he won the in-person vote. He won the mail-in ballots that were official, the absentee ballots, all of those. But nobody could have predicted COVID and the response to this, or maybe we could have, but everything was set up against Donald Trump. And that's the point I want to make, is that the left had already won their revolution. Nobody thought that the left would ever ally with the neocons, with these globalists, with the big corporations, but they have, and now they have absolute power. And that's because the left did something that we on the right should have been doing a long time ago. And it's the only thing we can do if we want to save this country. And that is become a revolutionary subversive movement. And when I say revolutionary, I don't mean put on your Hawaiian shirt and go out into the streets. I mean become subversive. Become revolutionary instead of reactionary. We have to become activists in everything we do. You see, the left are revolutionary. They just push, 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 always for change. It's the meme, they push so far to the left that they go into a horseshoe. That's why we have college campuses now trying to segregate dorms. They push so far to one direction, they've ended up back around the other side. But that's what we should have been doing. And we built the left into what it is now. Back in the 1930s and 40s, when the right pushed these groups like the Frankfurt School and the Fabian Socialists out of Europe. And then back in the 60s and 70s with McCarthyism and, of course, the FBI's attacks on the Yippie movement. We sent these people underground, and they had to plot how they would take over America from the shadows. And everything they planned, they have done. They took over institutions. They started in the universities, started brainwashing kids. They started going into different fields. I mean, look, for God's sakes, you had Dr. Spock, who the whole generation that I'm in, the millennial generation, our parents read those books about the self-esteem movement. And those were made to weaken our male children, to feminize them, to demoralize them. And then, of course, you have the media, Hollywood, television, everything we see on TV now. Conservatives are the bad guys. Suburbanites are made to look hypocritical, hypersexual, perverse. All of that's done on purpose. That's why so many of these brainwashed kids think that the rioting thugs in the cities are the good guys, and those of us who, have families and mow our lawns on Saturday, we're somehow oppressors. But that's not the case. Look, the catalyst event is now. This election is it. No matter what happens, one way or another, either the left will come out of this and they will completely oppress us. And yes, I mean oppress. That word is used a lot nowadays in the wrong way. But there's one group in America that is actually oppressed, and it is right-wing populists. And if you want to get more specific, right-wing populist heterosexual males, but overall it's right-wing populists and Christians. We are the only group that have been denied access to almost every institution across the board in some way or another. If you look going back to Obama with the denial of 501c3 status, all the way to the college campuses denying groups like YAF and Charlie Kirk's group official recognition, to them protesting Christian groups on campus and denying them official recognition. Now we have censorship, suppression, Google deranking search results so our businesses and our websites can't be seen. And then, of course, now Yelp making people write if somebody's racist, and that way they can destroy our businesses that we own just for supporting Trump. And now people are talking about lists and truth and reconciliation commissions and re-education. All of those words should sound familiar, and they should be terrifying, because those are all words that communists have used in the past. And that's what they do. They always repeat history because they don't have new ideas. They only have the same tired, failed ideas, but they keep trying them because they are insane. And yes, right-wingers aren't as oppressed as people under Jim Crow or as the Jews were in Germany in 1941, because the left will say, oh, you're just crying, you're not oppressed, African Americans are oppressed, but they're not. And yes, we're not as oppressed as those other groups were, like the Jews in Germany. But the Germans didn't wake up one morning and just say, all right, let's round up all the Jewish people today. No, that built up over time. It started with lists. It started with censorship. And if people are willing to take away our ability to live, our ability to have a business and support our family, they're going to take us offline completely and erase us from Facebook so we can't communicate with our families. What's to stop them from terminating us IRL? So this is the catalyst event, but maybe it's the right that needs to wake up and rise up. No matter what, we made a fatal flaw. We should have been revolutionary instead of reactionary. And we could still do that. We can raise our kids. First, we need to have lots of kids, though. That's a big part of this, too. We all need to have lots of kids. Don't worry about the financial end of things. You'll figure out a way. Start having babies right now. The future of this country depends on it. And raise those kids to be revolutionaries. Raise them to go into coding, go into journalism, go into law, and teach them to be activists first. Teach them about the propaganda on television. Show them so when they see this stuff, they'll recognize it right away. I used to think I was crazy when my mom would tell me that Harry Potter was, a way to indoctrinate kids into witchcraft and the occult. I thought that was crazy. But now I think she was right. Especially when you look on TikTok and you see all of these kids who think they're witches, and they all have the little Harry Potter tattoo right next to a pentagram tattoo. And it's insane, but it was true. And evil exists in this country. And these people, you don't want to think of your neighbors as evil, and most of them aren't. A lot of them are just victims of brainwashing. But their agenda is evil, and their intent is evil. And so we have to raise our kids to fight this. We have to fight it. We have to run for office, even if it's dog catcher. We need to think of ourselves as activists first and everything else second. The only thing that should come above being an activist now is being a family man, taking care of your family. But your job, forget it. If you get fired, so what? You'll find a way. But this is more important. Build resources, build networks, find like-minded people and get together and plan with them on how we can change things. Talk to everybody you can and expose what's going on. That's the long game. Now, it may be too late. No matter what happens with this election, even if Trump has all these lawsuits and he wins and there's recounts, and I hope Trump exposes everything. I hope he declassifies everything. He shows the world all of the stuff the left have been up to. Heck, he shows us where the aliens are hidden on, Area 51. Everything. Just expose everything, right? I'm joking there, but you know what I mean. Expose all the secrets. Show how corrupt these institutions are. But even if he does all of that, and he ends up back in the White House for another 4 years, that's not going to save us. The left will just go back to their plan of that Ukrainian-style revolution or something else. They'll start trying to demoralize us even more on television and the media. They'll censor us even more. I mean, they're censoring the President of the United States, for God's sakes. So, what do? Well, we plan the long game. We become revolutionary. But we also need to prepare for short-term action. We also prepare for things to heat up. Because this country was finished even before Donald Trump was put in office. He did a lot of good over the last 4 years. He bought us some time. He exposed a lot of things. But we had gone off the demographic cliff. We weren't having people integrate into society. We were no longer a nation well before Donald Trump got into office. Because, if we're going to be a civic nation, we have to agree on the civics. That's what we were told. We're a civic nation of immigrants, and we all are united under the Constitution and the law, but half of them don't believe in law and order. They don't like our Constitution, and they don't agree on our values. So, what is that? That's not a nation. So short term, we need to think of America differently. We need to figure out how to get past this idea of the federal government being the nation. That's what the left think. They think the government's the nation. We think the people are the nation. And so if we all move into different areas where we're around like-minded people, if we escape the cities and move to conservative areas and we start running for office, even if it's dog catcher, then we can build our own new nations. There are movements right now, like the annexation movement in Virginia. Those are great ideas. A constitutional convention, we should have one, and start talking about reforming different areas, different smaller unions. Because even if the left and their corruption and everything else doesn't destroy us, the federal debt will, or China will, the trade imbalance will, something will. The only thing Trump will do if he somehow, through a miracle, gets in is even further agitate the left and buy us a little more time. But we have to think differently on the right. And we do need to show up and start being activists. There is a march in Washington on Saturday. There's going to be a lot of people there. As many people who can go should go. Show up. Show our strength. Look, there is one thing we have that will help us win, and that is underdog status. That's what helped build the left into what they are now. Back in the 60s, when they were being suppressed, just like we are now, they became a counterculture. They became cool. And the left, they aren't funny anymore. They're not fun anymore. They don't allow comedy. They don't allow for edgy material. So we are that now. And that's one advantage we have. But we have to be seen. We need to become like they were. Have these big protests. Have these big gatherings. Form these groups to plan and think long term. And so I encourage everybody to go out to these events, especially the one in DC Saturday. And let's start thinking differently. Let's start planning for both the short game and the long game. And if it comes to, something quick and hot, then we'll do that too. Anyway, I know that's sort of a rant, but, it is what it is. See you guys.